guys, it's Dani. I wanted to do a VR to Lisa at Supportive Tarot with Lisa. The other day, she posted a video talking about her 5 favorite decks for shadow work, and I wanted to do the same. At the end of the year, I usually take the last couple of weeks to dive into shadow work, and I had these on my desk anyway, and I said, you know what? Perfect time to do this VR. So I gathered up my top 5 favorite decks that I use for shadow work, and in true Lisa fashion, I do have an honorable mention, which is going to be an Oracle deck that I've been absolutely loving throughout this whole process so far. So I don't want this to be too long, so I'm gonna dive right in. So my first deck is going to be one that might seem a little unusual because it's very bright colored, but I feel like it is perfect for shadow work. And that is the Linestriders Tarot. This deck, while it is very light and bright color-wise, I feel like the imagery and the tone is a bit deeper than that. I feel like it's almost haunted in some ways. And it really does pull out the shadow aspect of each card for me. I don't know what it is, if it's like the watercolor background that just makes it feel like there's something else lurking that really kind of makes you sit with an image and be like, what is it that I'm seeing? What is this, you know, Hierophant really telling me with this almost blind looking bear? Many of the characters don't have pupils in their eyes, or even when they do, like the Emperor, it's still very, like, haunted is the key word for this deck for me, especially when doing shadow work. And this guy reminds me of the that Ghost King. I can't remember his name. I'm a terrible nerd right now. From Lord of the Rings. Y'all know who I'm talking about. But even with the animals, which sometimes I don't always connect with on a deeper level, I don't know, for whatever reason, I find that this deck does wonders when it comes to shadow work. It just draws up such good energy, and I find it's a rather serious energy. So this is one of my go-tos for shadow work. And if I remember, I'll link any walkthroughs I have of these up in the cards, or I'll put them down below if you want to see the whole deck. My next one is going to be no surprise, because I feel like when I talk about shadow work, I often bring this deck up, and that is Tarot of the Secret Forest. Now this is the one that has a flip side in black and white, which I rarely use the flip side unless I feel drawn to specifically. But for me, this deck has such deep textures. It all seems like, I don't know if you can see this texture, it all seems like oil-based paintings that have this almost like stucco effect to them. I don't really know much about the art, if I'm being honest. It's just from what it looks like to me. But I just feel like it's very earthy and grounding and almost raw. This deck, I don't know what it is about it, if it's the colors or if it's the subject matter, because it's very earthy, that it draws up this like honest depth when I read with it. But it is definitely one of my favorites. And I also, again, I think I mentioned this in one of my other videos, I've also put some of their keywords on the back, because in the little white book, it only came with a little white book, but in this little white book, they had very interesting takes on some of the cards that we don't normally see. At least I feel like I don't normally see. So some of those I kind of put their own interpretation on the back, just to give that like extra punch for this deck, because it is so unique and it doesn't really follow an RWS system, which is what I'm used to reading. So I really did and do love this deck. And when I'm doing some serious shadow work, I always pull it out. I always get a lot of that kind of stuff done with this deck in the fall. Usually around Samhain, I will pull this deck out because I don't know, there's just something about it that just screams that fall energy, and I don't know, it's like leaves on the ground. You know what I mean? So that is my second deck. My third is another lighter colored deck, and that is the Fountain Tarot. So this is my more masculine deck. I feel like this deck is super masculine. But having said that, it does give those feels of like action. And when going into shadow work, that's a lot of what I'm doing. Most times it's not only uncovering, but coming up with an action plan and coming up with what I need to do to incorporate better habits within these shadows, or different perspectives. I'm looking for some kind of action to do. I'm not just looking to sit with this shadow without working on this shadow. So I feel like when it comes to this deck, it really gives that action. So I love pulling this deck out when I'm doing kind of my end of my work. Like once I've kind of dove into the shadow, uncovered it, sat with it, kind of picked it apart, I usually come to this and do a spread for actions, you know? Like, what do I need to do in order to, you know, try to get rid of this shadow, or try to work with this shadow in better ways and be in a better space. But that is the Fountain Tarot. So that is my number 3 deck. My number 4 is one of my favorite decks. And that is Revival Art Tarot. So with this deck, it is magical. I love the depictions in this deck. I love the history behind it. And I love some of the unexpected intuitive hits that come with using art that was not specifically made for the tarot, if that makes sense. I know a lot of people hate decks that have artwork that was kind of made to fit in these archetypes, but for whatever reason, I love it. I really do. Because when it comes to reading tarot, you know, yes, I love a good RWS system. I love, you know, seeing these familiar themes and these familiar faces, if you will, you know, the familiar artwork. However, there's something about seeing an image and thinking, that really reminds me of this archetype, that really reminds me of this situation, and kind of placing it in there and then allowing that intuitive hit to then take over. Because when I read tarot, yes, I read the system, but I also work off of energy. So sometimes I can pull a card, and depending upon who I'm reading for, what the situation is, what I get from a card may have nothing to do with the meaning of, let's say, the 6 of Cups, you know? But from this image, there's something that's important there. And I think that's why I love that aspect of like taking art and having that vibe, that energy there, but not really having that same picture, you know, that same thing. I don't know. Hard to describe. Can't articulate these words. So the last deck I have, ooh, did you see it? Did you see it? Don't cheat. Is the Sasuraibito. My bad. So the Sasuraibito is one of my favorite decks all around. I have fluff on it. But more than that, I feel like as a shadow work deck, it is perfect. because it does have like an underlying kind of shadow vibe in a lot of the cards. But more so, I just feel like everything is really relatable. Like when I see the images, it's like I automatically know what they're trying to say, what the point of it is, how it's trying to come across. They just feel very familiar to me. And it's because I feel like they have a bit of that modern vibe to it, that it kind of brings it into this century, if you will, where these characters are a little more recognizable and these archetypes are a little more relatable to a more modern version. And it's definitely one of those decks that really speaks to my soul. So this would have to be my number 1 shadow work deck. So now onto my honorable mention. Okay, mom duties. So my last little honorable mention, my last deck that I'm going to show you is my Oracle. And I battled. I didn't know if I was going to get this deck. I was back and forth. But eventually, Dustin made me do it. Dustin at Modern Metaphysic Man got this deck, and I was asking, I was like, I just don't know. I just don't know. And he was like, get it. You're really going to like it. And I did, and I don't regret it. I don't think I will ever not use this for shadow work again. I feel like it's that powerful a tool. And that is the Archetypes deck by Kim Krans. It's for part of the Wild Unknown. While I feel like I've separated a lot from the Wild Unknown Tarot, this is a completely different aspect. These cards not only are really interesting, of course, they're, this is a round deck, so that alone is very neat. But the concept behind it, the imagery within it, which can be rather strange and odd, which you guys know I like. I love the very odd nature of it, but even more so, this is the kind of stuff I used to do as a teenager, this kind of art. And so it speaks to me on that, like, teenage level, only deeper, And I think the thing about this one, I was really reluctant to get it because I felt like, well, I'm really going to need the guidebook, and I don't usually like to get decks that I'm gonna need to tote around the guidebook. You know what I mean? Because I just feel like having to stop and then read about something defeats the purpose of what I use the cards for, and that's really to go with that gut instinct and use my intuition and read the energy of what's going on around it. And there are just some decks that I don't feel like I could do that because these keywords are just so vague and so random that I'm just like, well, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what they were going for without having to stop and read it. So normally I don't like decks like that, and I think that's why I battled so much with this one, because I'm like, I'm gonna need this guidebook and I'm not gonna be able to use it freely like I really like to do. But I was completely wrong, because they do have great keywords. These archetypes are phenomenal, and you can draw so much. Now there are a few that, yes, I would definitely recommend reading regardless if you feel like you get it or not. But I will say that the guidebook is amazing. I love the style that she did it in. Again, it has this very much handwritten vibe to it. But I like the way that each one is set up, because it has the title and some basic keywords at the top. So we have like the lover, the heart, the beloved, the devoted. But then down here at the bottom, it talks about when it's in the light. It could mean connection, expansion, devotion, awe. When dark, indulgent, attachment, and obsession. And to go deeper, contemplate Aphrodite, Krishna, and Radha. So like really cool stuff. On the sides, there's little tidbits. And then, of course, the very meat of each card is very interesting. So I just love the way that it's set up. That was a big plus for me. So my new companion to all my shadow work decks is definitely this archetype deck. It has really been eye-opening and very interesting what it pulls out. Matter of fact, my newest spread that I created for myself for my shadow work at the end of this month, you know, what I've been working on, I kind of go a little bit at a time. I pull my main 2 cards, which is like my current state and my main shadow that I need to kind of work with where I'm at. I use these archetype cards, and then from there I take a few days to contemplate on, you know, 4 questions that go along with that aspect of my current state. And then once I'm done with that, then I'll go and I'll pull 4 more cards from a tarot deck and work on my shadow aspect. So it's been really interesting. Once I kind of finish this up, and this is the first time I use this spread, because I just kind of created it the other day, and I've really been working on it and kind of cultivating what I want to do with it. And I'll let you guys know how that goes. Maybe I'll do a video on that spread so I can share my new shadow work spread with you guys. I know Lisa shared a few on hers, and this is the one I'm working on. So depending upon how it goes, and if there's stuff I need to change as I go along, then I will rearrange that and I'll do like a second part, and I'll do a shadow work spread for you guys. But that's it. Those are my top 5 tarot shadow work decks and my Oracle shadow work deck. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching. If you are looking for me, all my links are below, and I will see you guys very soon. Sending you all my love. Mwah. Later, Gators.